the transport ship descended through the atmosphere of Station Apex, carrying the newest generation of cadets toward the Galactic Military Academy. Inside the observation deck, Ju stood silently with her hand pressed against the cold glass, watching the enormous station slowly grow larger before her. She had trained her entire life for this moment. 22 years of discipline. 22 years of pushing her body beyond its limits and sharpening her mind through endless study, all for one purpose: to stand among the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Station Apex was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was a colossal structure floating in orbit, a city among the stars. Dozens of docking ports extended from the central hub like giant metal fingers reaching into space, constantly receiving and launching ships from hundreds of different worlds. Every few seconds, another vessel moved across the massive station. Ju recognized many of them from her military studies. The sharp, aggressive warships of the Vorton Raiders, the elegant, almost invisible corvettes used by the Skalax assassins, the terrifying armored dreadnoughts of the Hurak berserkers. Every species had developed its own philosophy of war. Some relied on speed, some relied on strength, some relied on deception. Ju had studied them all, their tactics, their weaknesses, their history, their victories, their defeats. She had prepared for everything, almost. Nervous, the voice beside her broke through her thoughts. Jiuo turned slightly. Tae Min, one of the only other two humans accepted into this year's class, leaned casually against the wall with his arms crossed. He was taller than her, built like a professional fighter, but his relaxed expression and easy smile made him seem less like a soldier and more like someone you could trust immediately. Joe looked back at the station outside. No. The answer came quickly. Simple. Honest. Tae raised an eyebrow. Not even a little. Ju remained silent for a moment. Then she spoke. No. And it was the truth. She wasn't afraid of the academy. She wasn't afraid of the alien warriors waiting inside. She had spent her entire life preparing for this. But as the transport ship entered the station's docking corridor, one thought crossed her mind. For the first time in history, humanity was no longer the strongest species on Earth. Here, among the stars, they were just another recruit. She felt many things: excitement, curiosity, determination, but not nervousness. Fear was something she had trained herself to control years ago. Tammin laughed. You're a terrible liar. Everyone's nervous on their first day. Are you nervous? Ju asked. Terrified, he admitted cheerfully. But that's normal. We're about to train with species that evolved as apex predators. Some of them literally ate their way to the top of their food chains. Meanwhile, humans are just clever monkeys who learn to throw rocks really well. The third human, Heejin, joined them at the window. She was shorter than both of them with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We wouldn't be here if we weren't good enough, she said quietly. Earth doesn't send failures to the academy. The ship docked with the metallic clang that echoed through the hull. Ju picked up her single bag and followed the other cadets into the station. The corridor was wide enough for 10 humans to walk side by side, built to accommodate species of all sizes. The walls were covered in displays showing different parts of the academy: training rooms, simulation chambers, armories, and medical bays. They were herded into a massive assembly hall. Thousands of cadets from hundreds of species filled the space. Ju saw towering hurricaning skin and multiple limbs. She saw Vorton with their natural weapons and predatory eyes. Every species here had evolved to hunt, to kill, to dominate. And then there were the 3 humans standing together near the back. The academy commandant, a 4-armed Krell named Vexer, stepped onto the central platform. His voice boomed through the hall without need for amplification. Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. You are here because your species believes you are exceptional. You are here because you think you have what it takes to serve in the Galactic Defense Forces. Most of you are wrong. A murmur ran through the crowd. Vexer continued, his eyes scanning the assembled cadets. This academy has traditions older than some of your civilizations. One such tradition is the survival crucible. Every year, We select one cadet to test in the ultimate trial. That cadet is dropped onto a death world and given 72 hours to survive. 6 hours after the drop, 10 of the galaxy's finest hunters are released to track them down. Ju felt her pulse quicken slightly. She had read about the Crucible in the Academy's history files. No cadet had ever been killed during the trial. They were usually caught within the first day and extracted. It was meant to be a humbling experience, a lesson in humility for overconfident cadets. This year, Vexer said, and his eyes locked onto Ju. We have selected Cadet Ju of Earth. The hall erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others laughed. Ju heard the words soft skins, and prey species repeated multiple times. She kept her face expressionless, her body relaxed. She had learned long ago not to react to provocation. Tammin grabbed her arm. You can refuse, he whispered urgently. They can't force you to participate. I accept, Jiu said, her voice cutting through the noise. The hall went silent. Vexer's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval or amusement. Excellent. You will be transported to Carvath Prime immediately. The trial begins at dawn. The next few hours passed in a blur. Ju was taken to a preparation room where she was fitted with a basic survival suit. Nothing more than a thin layer of climate-resistant fabric. No weapons, no tools, no technology, beyond what she could make with her own hands. She was allowed to keep her academy uniform underneath, but that was all. An instructor, a human named Daehyun, who taught combat tactics, pulled her aside before she boarded the transport. Listen carefully, he said in Korean, making sure no translators would pick up his words. They chose you because they think humans are weak. They want to humiliate us to prove we don't belong here. But you and I both know the truth about humans. What truth? Ju asked. That we're the most dangerous species in the galaxy, Daehyun said quietly. Not because we're strong, or fast, or naturally armed, but because we don't quit ever. A Hurrik will fight until it's wounded, then retreat to heal. A Skal flee if the odds turn against it, but a human will chase its prey for days, weeks if necessary. Will adapt to any environment, use any tool, learn any skill. We're persistence predators, Ju. We evolved to outlast everything else on our planet. He pressed something into her hand. It was a small piece of flint. They said no tools, but they didn't say you couldn't pick up a rock. Make them regret choosing you. Ju closed her hand around the flint and nodded. The transport took her to Carvath Prime alone. The planet was beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Dense jungles covered most of the landmass. The trees grew hundreds of meters tall, their canopies blocking out most of the sunlight. She could hear sounds in the distance, roars, screams, the crack of something massive moving through the undergrowth. The transport pilot, a bored-looking Vortan, barely glanced at her as he opened the rear hatch. Your drop zone is below. 72 hours starting now. Try not to die too quickly. It's more entertaining when the prey runs. Jiu stepped to the edge of the hatch and looked down. The jungle canopy was 30 meters below. She could make out a small clearing where she was meant to land. Without hesitation, she jumped. She hit the ground rolling, absorbing the impact the way she had been trained. Pain shot through her legs, but nothing broke. She stood and took a moment to assess her surroundings. The clearing was roughly circular, about 20 meters across. The jungle pressed in from all sides, dark and threatening. 6 hours. She had 6 hours before the hunters arrived. Ju didn't run. Instead, she pulled out the piece of flint Daehyun had given her and began to work. She gathered stones of different sizes and shapes. She stripped bark from trees and wove it into cordage. She found a straight branch and began sharpening it against a rock, creating a crude spear. As she worked, she thought about what the instructor had said. Persistence predators. That was the key. The hunters expected her to run, to hide, to be afraid. They expected prey behavior. They were going to learn that humans stopped being prey a long time ago. Ju smiled as she set her first trap. The viewing halls of the Galactic Military Academy were packed. Thousands of cadets, instructors, and visiting dignitaries crowded around holographic displays showing live feeds from Carvath Prime. The annual Survival Crucible always drew massive audiences. It was entertainment, tradition, and education all wrapped into one event. Tae Min and Hin sat together in the human section, a small cluster of seats that felt isolated from the rest of the crowd around them. Alien cadets made bets on how long Ju would last. Most gave her less than 6 hours after the hunters dropped. Some were more generous and predicted 12 hours. No one bet on her lasting the full 72. "They're making jokes," Hee-jin said quietly, her hands clenched into fists. "They're laughing at her." "Let them laugh," Taemin replied, though his own jaw was tight. "Ju doesn't need us to defend her reputation. She'll do that herself." On the main display, they watched as Ju worked in the clearing. She moved with focused efficiency, gathering materials and constructing basic tools. She tested the edge of her stone knife against her thumb, nodded in satisfaction, and moved on to the next task. There was no panic in her movements, no fear. She looked like someone preparing for a job, not fighting for survival. 6 hours until hunter deployment. The automated announcer's voice echoed through the hall. Current odds: cadet capture within 8 hours of hunter deployment. Recommended viewing time: 12 to 16 hours. The scene shifted to show the 10 hunters preparing in their deployment bay. Each one was a champion of their species, chosen for their hunting prowess and combat record. They checked their equipment, tested their weapons, and discussed strategy. The audio feed carried their conversation to the viewing halls. A human, one of the Scalic assassins, hissed, his skin flickering between green and brown in amusement. "They gave us a soft skin to hunt. This will be over before the first sunset." Grath, the massive Hurak berserker, laughed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "I have hunted across 40 worlds. I have taken down prey twice my size. This human will be a footnote in my record." The Vorton leader, Thrax, was more cautious. "Do not underestimate any prey. Humans would not be in the academy if they had no skills." "Skills?" Another hunter, a lean predator from the Verith species, made a dismissive gesture. "They have no natural weapons, no armor, no speed. They are prey animals that learn to use tools. Strip away their technology, and they are nothing." Back on Karvath Prime, Jiu had finished her preparations. She had created several crude weapons, spears, a wooden club, a stone axe. She had woven a simple pack from bark and filled it with useful stones. Most importantly, she had spent the last 4 hours setting traps throughout the jungle around her clearing. She knew the hunters would come. She knew they were faster, stronger, and better equipped than her. But she also knew something they didn't. Humans didn't win fights by being stronger. They won by being smarter, more patient, and more willing to do whatever it took to survive. As the sun began to set on Karvath Prime, Jiu climbed a tall tree near the clearing and settled into a position where she could watch. She wrapped herself in leaves and bark for camouflage and waited. She had food, protein-rich insects she had identified as safe to eat. She had water from a nearby stream. She could wait for days if necessary, but she wouldn't have to wait that long. The hunter transport arrived at dusk. The 10 predators spread out quickly, each taking a different direction from the clearing. Their plan was simple: surround the area, close the net, and capture the human before she could establish any real advantage. They moved with confidence, certain of their victory. Grath took the northern route. He was built for this kind of work. His thick armor made him nearly invulnerable to the planet's natural dangers. His claws could tear through tree trunks. His senses were sharp enough to track a single drop of blood across kilometers of terrain. He found the clearing within an hour. It was empty as expected. The human had run good. The chase was always the best part of the hunt. Grath examined the area carefully, looking for tracks, for signs of which direction the prey had fled. He found something better: a trail. The human had left clear marks on trees, broken branches pointing deeper into the jungle. Either she was panicking and leaving signs accidentally, or she was trying to create a false trail. Either way, it gave Grath a direction to follow. The Hurak moved through the jungle like a living tank, crushing vegetation under his weight. He followed the trail for over an hour, growing more excited with each sign. The human was close. He could feel it. He entered a small grove where the trees grew less densely. In the center was a crude shelter made of branches and leaves. Perfect. The human was hiding inside, probably exhausted from running. Graf approached carefully, ready to grab her the moment she tried to flee. The shelter was empty, except for more primitive drawings and some abandoned supplies. Graf snarled in frustration, another false trail. But as he turned to leave, he heard a sound above him, a whistling sound growing louder. Graf looked up just in time to see the sharpened stake falling toward his face. His instinct saved him. He jerked his head to the side, and the stake glanced off his armored shoulder instead of piercing his eye. But it was a feint. He had looked up, which meant he wasn't looking at the shadows behind him. Jiu dropped from her hiding spot in the trees. She landed on Graf's back, already driving her stone knife toward the weak point she had memorized from her studies, the gap between his neck armor plates. The blade was crude but sharp, and she put all her weight behind it. Graf roared and spun, trying to throw her off. But Jiu held on, twisting the blade, making the wound worse. Hot blood sprayed across her hands. The heroic stumbled, confusion replacing confidence. How was this happening? He was the hunter, she was prey. Jiu rode him down as he fell. She didn't stop stabbing until the massive body went still. Then she sat back, breathing hard, and looked at what she had done. Her first kill. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. She took Graf's equipment, his communication device, his knife, his supply pack. Then she did something that would change everything. She carved a symbol into a nearby tree, a single word in multiple languages. 9. In the viewing halls, complete silence had fallen. Thousands of aliens stared at the displays in shock. The human hadn't run. She hadn't hidden. She had hunted. Tammin was gripping the armrest of his seat so hard his knuckles were white. Heejin had tears streaming down her face. Though whether from relief or fear, she wasn't sure. Instructor DeHun stood in the back of the hall, his face carefully neutral. But inside, he was smiling. He had told them Jiu was dangerous. Now they were beginning to understand. Jiu activated Graf's communication device. The channel connected to all 10 hunters automatically. She could hear them calling to each other, coordinating their search. They didn't know yet that Graf was dead. She could use that. She began to sing. It was an old song from Earth, something ancient and primal, a hunting song from humanity's earliest days. The melody was simple but haunting. It echoed through the communication channel, reaching every hunter simultaneously. The effect was immediate. The confident chatter stopped. Confused questions filled the channel. What was that sound? Where was Graf? Why wasn't he responding? 2 Skalax assassins changed direction, heading toward Graf's last known position. They moved together, using their natural camouflage to blend into the jungle. They were experts at this kind of work. Silent, deadly, efficient. But Jiu had been tracking them through Graf's equipment. She knew where they were going, and she knew how Skalax hunted. They relied on stealth and sudden strikes. They expected their prey to be unaware of their approach. She didn't fight them directly. Instead, she had spent the last hour identifying the local flora and fauna. Carvith Prime was deadly to visitors who didn't know its dangers. One particular plant produced berries that looked harmless but contained a powerful neurotoxin. The local animals had evolved immunity. Visitors had not. Jiu found the stream where the Skull would need to refill their water supplies. She crushed the berries into the water upstream and waited. Patience. That was the human advantage. She could wait longer than any other species. The Skalax arrived at dusk, found the stream, and drank deeply. They moved on unaware, but within an hour, the poison took effect. Their movements became sluggish. Their camouflage flickered and failed. They collapsed against trees, struggling to breathe. Jiu found them easily. She ended their suffering quickly with Graf's blade. Then she marked 2 more trees. 8-7, 3 hunters dead in less than 24 hours. The impossible had happened. The prey had become the predator, and Jiu was just getting started. The emergency meeting of the Academy Council convened at midnight. Commandant Vexer sat at the head of the circular table, his forearms clasped in front of him. Around him sat representatives from each of the major species. their faces showing varying degrees of shock, anger, and disbelief. "This is unprecedented," declared the Vorten ambassador, slamming his fist on the table. "3 hunters dead in one day. We must stop the trial immediately and extract the remaining 7. "On what grounds?" The human ambassador Kyung-soo leaned back in his chair with an expression of polite interest. "The rules state clearly that the trial continues for 72 hours, or until the cadet is captured. Neither condition has been met. The rules were written for normal circumstances." The Skal representative hissed. "Not for murder." "Murder?" Kyung-gu raised an eyebrow. "I was under the impression that your champions were hunting my cadet with the intention of capture. When did self-defense become murder?" "She killed them," the Hurric elder growled. "She didn't simply evade them. She hunted them down and killed them." "Yes," Kyung-gu agreed calmly. "She defended herself against 10 predators who were actively hunting her. That seems reasonable to me." The room erupted in angry voices. Kyung-gu waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "Let me be very clear about something. You chose to hunt a human. You made that choice freely. Now you're upset because she's better at it than you expected. That's not a rules violation, that's just embarrassment." Back on Karvath Prime, the 7 remaining hunters had abandoned all pretense of hunting. They had gathered on a rocky outcrop that gave them clear sight lines in all directions. They set up a defensive perimeter with overlapping fields of fire. They took turns sleeping while others kept watch. The trial had become a survival exercise for them instead of for their prey. Commander Thrax, the Vorten leader, tried to maintain order. "We hold this position until extraction. No one goes out alone. No one takes unnecessary risks. We simply wait." "For how long?" one of the Vareth warriors asked. His species prided themselves on courage, but even he couldn't hide the fear in his voice. "2 more days while that thing hunts us in the darkness." "She's not a thing," Thrax said sharply. "She's a cadet like you, like all of us. She's just better prepared than we gave her credit for." "Better prepared?" The Verth laughed bitterly. "She has killed 3 trained warriors with nothing but primitive weapons and local resources. That's not preparation, that's something else entirely." From her position in the trees 500 meters away, Ju watched the hunters through a scope she had taken from Grath's equipment. She could see their defensive positions, their patrol patterns, their weak points, but she didn't attack. Not yet. She had learned something important from studying Earth's predators. The most dangerous part of a wounded animal was its fear. When prey animals were cornered, they became unpredictable. They fought with desperate strength because they had nothing left to lose. The hunters were cornered now, and that made them dangerous. So instead of attacking directly, Ju decided to break them psychologically first. She activated the communication device and began to speak. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Hello, hunters. I know you can hear me. I want you to understand something. I didn't choose this. You chose this. You decided to hunt a human. You wanted to prove we were weak." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But humans aren't weak. We're just different. We evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. The predators were faster, stronger, had better teeth and claws. So, we learned to be smarter. We learned to be patient. We learned to outlast everything else." Another pause. Ju could see the hunters looking at each other nervously. "I'm going to give you a choice. You can stay in your little fortress and wait for extraction. Maybe you'll survive. Maybe I'll find a way through your defenses. Or you can surrender. Put down your weapons. Activate your emergency beacons, and I'll let you live." "She's lying," one of the hunters said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," Thrax replied, "but she let the others die quickly. She could have made them suffer. That means something." The night passed slowly. Ju didn't sleep. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she used the darkness to move closer to the hunter's position. She didn't attack. She just made noise. Rocks falling in the distance. Branches cracking. The sound of movement that could be anything or nothing. By dawn, the hunters were exhausted. They had spent the entire night jumping at shadows, pointing weapons at imaginary threats. Their nerves were frayed, their judgment was impaired, and that was exactly what Ju wanted. The Vareth champion, a warrior named Korin, had enough. "This is cowardice," he declared. "We are hunters, not prey. I will not cower here while a single human plays games with us." "Don't be stupid," Thrax warned. "That's exactly what she wants." But Corin was already moving, climbing down from the outcrop with his weapon ready. His species had a deep cultural belief in face-to-face combat. Hiding felt like dishonor. He would find the human and end this properly. Ju had predicted this. She had studied each species carefully and knew their psychological weaknesses. The Verath valued honor above survival. It made them predictable. She had spent the morning setting up a killing field between the jungle edge and the rocky outcrop. Pressure plates made from bent branches, tripwires connected to sharpened stakes, pit traps covered with leaves and grass. Corin moved confidently into the jungle, his keen eyes scanning for threats. He was an experienced warrior. He wouldn't fall for obvious traps. But Ju's traps weren't obvious. They were layered. The first trap was meant to be seen and avoided. The second trap was hidden along the path he would take to avoid the first trap, and the third trap was placed where he would dodge after triggering the second trap. Corin saw the first tripwire and stepped over it carefully. He didn't see the pressure plate. His foot came down, the branch released, and a sharpened stake swung from the side aimed at his legs. He jumped back exactly as Ju had predicted, and his other foot broke through the thin covering of a pit trap. He didn't fall far. The pit was only 2 meters deep, but it was enough. Sharpened sticks lined the bottom. Corin's armor protected him from the worst of it, but several stakes penetrated weak points. He roared in pain and tried to climb out. Ju appeared at the edge of the pit. She held one of the hunter's energy weapons taken from the skull she had killed. Corin looked up at her, seeing his death approaching. "I'm sorry," Ju said quietly. Then she fired. She carved 7 into a tree, where the other hunters could see it, and returned to her observation position. 6 left. The next kill came through no effort of her own. The Krill War Master, driven half-mad by exhaustion and fear, began arguing with one of the Drayor shock troops. The argument turned physical. Energy weapons were drawn. By the time Thrax restored order, the Krill was dead. Ju simply marked his body afterward with 6. She was down to 5 targets. That evening, she hacked into the Academy's broadcast system, using the equipment she had taken from the hunters. It took hours of careful work, but she finally broke through the encryption. Her face appeared on every screen in the viewing halls, covered in mud and blood, but very much alive. "I want everyone to understand something," she said, looking directly at the camera. "I'm not a monster. I'm not doing this because I enjoy it. I'm doing this because you forced me to. You decided to hunt a human. You decided to make this a life-or-death situation. So here we are." She took a breath. 4 hunters left. "I'll be done by dawn. And when I'm done, I want you to remember this moment. Remember what happens when you underestimate humans. We don't run. We don't hide. We hunt back." The broadcast cut out. In the viewing halls, absolute silence reigned. Even the most arrogant cadets had stopped making jokes. They were beginning to understand what Instructor Dahyun had tried to tell them. Humans were persistence predators, and Ju was the most persistent of them all. On the rocky outcrop, the 4 remaining hunters huddled together. They were the best warriors their species had to offer. They had trained their entire lives for combat. They had fought in real battles and won, but none of that mattered now. "What do we do?" One of the Drayor brothers, Vaughn, asked quietly. Thrax looked at each of them. "We survive. That's all we can do. We hold this position, watch each other's backs, and wait for extraction. She can't get all of us. Not if we stay together." But even as he said it, Thrax wondered if he was right, because somewhere in the darkness, Ju was watching them, and she was learning their patterns, their weaknesses, their fears. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the jungle for a brief moment. And in that moment, the hunters saw a silhouette in the trees, a small figure covered in mud and blood, with dead, calm eyes. Then darkness fell again, and she was gone. But they knew she would be back. Predators always returned to finish their hunt. It was just a matter of time. Dawn broke over Karvath Prime, with blood-red light filtering through the jungle canopy. The 4 remaining hunters looked like they had aged years in a single night. Dark circles hung under their eyes. Their hands shook slightly as they gripped their weapons. They had maintained their defensive position on the rocky outcrop, but the psychological toll was obvious. Commander Thrax counted heads for the 100th time. Himself, the two Drayor brothers, Vaughn and Krell, and one remaining Varath warrior named Silix. 4 warriors against 1 human cadet. The odds should have been overwhelmingly in their favor. Should have been. Extraction arrives in 18 hours, Thrax announced, trying to keep his voice steady. We've made it through the worst. We just need to hold a little longer. The worst? Silix laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. Commander, we've lost 6 hunters. 6? The human is still out there and she's hunting us like we're nothing. Before Thrax could respond, something landed at his feet. He looked down and felt his blood run cold. It was Corrin's weapon, the one the Varath champion had carried when he left their position. Attached to it was a piece of bark with a message carved into it. 4. She was here, Vaughn whispered, scanning the rocks around them frantically. She got close enough to leave this, and we didn't even see her. Krell checked his weapon nervously. How? We had guards posted. We had motion sensors. How did she get past all of that? The answer came over their communication channel. Gia's voice calm and measured. Because you're thinking like hunters. You're looking for prey that runs, that hides, that makes mistakes out of fear. But I'm not afraid anymore. I'm tired, I'm hurt, and I'm angry. But I'm not afraid. She paused. I spent last night moving through your perimeter 3 times. I could have killed any of you. I chose not to. I wanted you to know that your defenses mean nothing. Your weapons mean nothing. Your experience means nothing. Because you're not fighting a prey animal anymore. You're fighting a human. Thrax activated his transmitter. What do you want from us? I want you to understand, Ju replied. I want you to truly understand what you did. You didn't just hunt me. You hunted my entire species. You decided that humans were weak, that we didn't deserve respect. So I'm teaching you a lesson. I'm showing you what humans really are. We understand, Thrax said quickly. We made a mistake. We underestimated you. It won't happen again. You're right about that, Ju said. Then the channel went silent. For the next 6 hours, nothing happened. The hunters maintained their positions, watching every shadow, jumping at every sound. The waiting was almost worse than an actual attack. Their nerves were stretched to the breaking point. Then Silex, the remaining Varath warrior, stood up abruptly. I can't do this anymore. I can't sit here waiting to die like some scared prey animal. If she wants me, she can have me. But I'll die fighting. Don't be stupid, Thrax ordered. That's exactly what she wants. But Silix was already moving, climbing down from the outcrop. My species doesn't hide. We face our enemies. I'll die with honor, or I won't die at all. He made it 50 meters before the jungle erupted around him. Ju had been waiting, watching for one of them to break. She hit Silex with a barrage of thrown stones from multiple directions, disorienting him. Then she attacked from behind, using one of the taken energy weapons to disable his armor before finishing him with a blade. 3, she called out, her voice carrying across the distance to the remaining hunters. Vaughn and Krell, the Drayor brothers, looked at each other. They had trained together since childhood. They knew each other's thoughts, each other's fighting styles. They were strongest together. But sitting here waiting was killing them slowly. We should attack, Forn said quietly. Take the fight to her. Use our superior numbers. Thrax shook his head. That's what she wants. She's been dividing us, picking us off one by one. If we leave this position, she wins. If we stay here, we die anyway, Krell argued. At least if we attack, we die on our terms. No, Thrax said firmly. We wait for extraction, that's an order. But as the sun climbed higher, Ju began her psychological assault in earnest. She used the communication channel to play recordings she had made, the last moments of the hunters she had killed, their voices calling for help, for mercy, for extraction. She played them over and over until Thrax finally shut down all their communication devices. Then she started throwing things into their camp. Pieces of armor from the fallen hunters, weapons, personal items. Each one was a message. I was close enough to take these. I could have taken you too. Thorn cracked first. He activated his communication device despite Thrax's orders and started shouting, "Face me! Stop these cowards' tactics and face me like a warrior." Geo's response was calm. "Why? I'm winning. You're the ones who chose this format. I'm just playing by your rules. Our rules include honor." Vor roared. "Honor," Jew repeated. "You want to talk about honor? You ganged up 10 against 1. You hunted someone who never did anything to you. You did it for entertainment. Where was your honor then?" Vor didn't have an answer for that. As afternoon turned to evening, Jew changed tactics. She stopped the psychological warfare and simply waited. She knew they were exhausted, frightened, and making mistakes. She didn't need to push anymore. They would break themselves. And she was right. Vaughn, unable to bear the waiting any longer, made a decision. "Brother," he said to Krill, "I'm going to find water. We're almost out, and extraction is still hours away." "Don't," Krell pleaded. "Please don't leave." "I'll be quick," Vorn promised. 5 minutes. Stay here with the commander." He was gone before anyone could stop him. Jew had been watching their water situation carefully. She knew they would run out eventually. She knew one of them would have to leave to refill their supplies, and she knew exactly where the nearest water source was. She didn't ambush Vaughn at the stream. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she waited until he started back toward the outcrop. She wounded herself deliberately, cutting her own arm and leaving a blood trail. When Vaughn saw it, his training took over. He followed, thinking she was injured and vulnerable. The trail led to unstable ground near a cliff edge. Jew had tested every meter of it, knew exactly where it was safe to step. Vor didn't have that knowledge. When he charged at her, she simply stepped aside. His momentum carried him forward onto the unstable ground, and it gave way beneath him. He fell, screaming. The sound echoed across the jungle and reached the outcrop where Krell and Thrax were waiting. Krell ran toward the sound without thinking. Driven by the bond between brothers, Jew let him reach Vorn's body. She watched from the shadows as Krell knelt beside his brother, checking for signs of life. There were none. The fall had killed him instantly. "Two," Jew said quietly, stepping into view. Krell looked up at her with red eyes full of tears and rage. He drew his weapon, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. "Kill me," he said. "Finish it." "No," Jew replied. She lowered her own weapon. "You loved your brother. I understand that. I have friends too, people I would die for. I don't want to kill you." "Then what do you want?" Krell demanded. "I want you to surrender," Jew said. "Activate your emergency beacon. Call for extraction. Leave this place. Go home and tell everyone what happened here. Tell them what happens when you hunt humans." Krell stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached for his emergency beacon. The signal activated, sending a priority extraction request to the Academy. He set down his weapons and sat beside his brother's body. "Thank you," Jew said quietly. Then she melted back into the jungle. Back at the outcrop, Thrax received the notification that Krell had activated his beacon. He understood what it meant. 3 hunters dead, 1 surrendered. That left only him. He had been a warrior his entire life. He had fought in wars, led troops into battle, earned medals and honors. But sitting alone on that rocky outcrop, waiting for a human cadet he couldn't see or hear, Thrax realized something important. He had already lost. Not because Jew was stronger or faster or better equipped, but because she was more willing to do whatever it took to survive. When the extraction ships arrived at dawn, they found Krell sitting with his brother's body. They found Thrax alive but broken, staring at the jungle with haunted eyes. And they found 9 marked trees, each with a number carved into it. But they didn't find Jiwoo. She was already moving through the jungle toward the original extraction point, carrying a makeshift sack. Inside the sack were 9 skulls, cleaned and prepared according to ancient human tradition. She had survived, she had won, and she had a message to deliver. The extraction ship touched down in the Academy's main hangar bay to a scene unlike anything in the station's long history. Thousands of beings crowded the viewing platforms above, watching in complete silence. No one spoke, no one moved. They just waited. The ship's ramp lowered, and Jill walked out alone. Her academy uniform was torn and stained with blood and mud. Her face was scratched and bruised. She moved with a slight limp, favoring her left leg, but she held her head high, and in her hand she carried a rough cloth sack. Taman and Hij Jin pushed through the crowd and ran to her. They didn't speak, just pulled her into a tight embrace. Ju allowed it for a moment, then gently pushed them back. She had something she needed to do first. She walked to the center of the hangar, where Commandant Vexer and the council representatives waited. The silence was absolute. Every eye in the hangar was on her. She stopped in front of them and dropped the sack at their feet. 9 skulls rolled out across the polished floor. "You asked if humans belong in the Galactic Military Academy," Ju said, her voice carrying in the quiet. "Here's my answer." Then her legs gave out. She collapsed, and the medical team that had been waiting nearby rushed forward. They carried her away on a stretcher, while the skulls remained on the floor. A stark reminder of what had happened. Jiu spent 3 days in the medical bay. Her injuries were extensive, but not life-threatening. Broken ribs, a fractured ankle, multiple cuts and bruises, severe dehydration, and exhaustion. The doctor said she should have died a dozen times over, but she hadn't, because humans were very hard to kill. While she recovered, the galaxy argued. News of the survival crucible had spread across every civilized world. Some called Ju a hero, others called her a murderer. Debates raged in government chambers, militaries, and public forums, but everyone agreed on one thing: they had seriously underestimated humanity. The formal tribunal convened in the Academy's Great Hall. Ju, still recovering but insisting on attending, sat in the center of the room. Around her sat judges from a dozen species, representatives from various governments, and the Academy's leadership. Ambassador Kyung-soo presented humanity's defense. The rules of the survival crucible were clear. One cadet dropped on a hostile world, given 72 hours to survive with 10 hunters pursuing them. At no point did the rules state that the cadet could not fight back. At no point did they forbid lethal force in self-defense. Jiu followed every rule. She simply did it better than anyone expected. She killed 9 trained warriors, the Vorton representative argued. That goes beyond self-defense. Does it? Kyung-gu replied. Those 9 warriors were actively hunting her with the intention of capture. She had no way of knowing what would happen if she were captured. For all she knew, being captured meant death. She did what any soldier would do when faced with superior numbers and no hope of reinforcement. She eliminated the threats one by one. Instructor DeHun was called to testify. He stood before the tribunal with his hands clasped behind his back, looking every bit the professional soldier. "I trained Cadet Ju," he said. "I taught her that humans survive not through strength, but through intelligence, adaptability, and sheer unwillingness to quit. She demonstrated all those qualities and more." "Did you teach her to kill?" a judge asked. "I taught her to survive," Dion corrected. "Sometimes survival requires killing. Every species in this room understands that. You just don't like it when humans prove they're good at it." The most powerful testimony came from Krell, the Drayor, who had surrendered. He stood before the tribunal with his head lowered, his voice filled with pain. "My brother died in that jungle. I watched him fall. I held his body, and I hated the human for it. But she could have killed me too. She could have ended me without effort. Instead, she gave me a choice: surrender and live, or fight and die. That's not savagery, that's mercy." He looked up, meeting the judge's eyes. "We started this. We chose to hunt a human for sport. We laughed about it. We made bets on how quickly we would catch her. We treated it like a game. She treated it like war. And in war, you do whatever it takes to survive. My people understand that. Why don't you?" The tribunal deliberated for 2 days. In the end, they reached their verdict. All charges against Ju were dismissed. Furthermore, she was awarded the Crucible Victor's Mark, the first cadet in Academy history to achieve this honor. The rules of the survival crucible were permanently changed. Never again would cadets be hunted for sport or tradition. The Academy asked Ju to speak before the entire student body. She stood on the central platform in the Great Hall, looking out at thousands of alien faces. Some showed respect, some showed fear, some showed anger. She didn't care about any of it. "I didn't want to kill anyone," she began, her voice quiet but clear. "I came here to learn. I came here to serve. I came here to prove that humans could stand alongside the galaxy's finest warriors. You turned it into a hunt, so I became the hunter." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Humans aren't special. We're not the strongest or the fastest. We don't have claws or armor or natural weapons. But we're persistent, we're adaptable, we're creative, and when you push us to the edge, we don't break. We push back harder." She looked directly at the predator species in the audience. "Don't hunt humans. We've been hunted before. On our home world, we were prey for thousands of years. We survived by becoming better predators than the ones hunting us. We learned to track, to plan, to never give up. Those instincts don't go away just because we reach the stars." She stepped down from the platform. "I hope I never have to do something like that again. But if I do, I will, because that's what humans do. We survive." The hall erupted in mixed reactions. Some species withdrew their cadets from the academy entirely. Others, particularly the Drayor, sent more. Humanity's reputation across the galaxy changed overnight. No longer were they seen as soft diplomats or lucky primitives. They were recognized as dangerous, capable, and not to be underestimated. Jiu completed her training over the next 3 years. She never forgot the 9 hunters she had killed. She learned their names, their histories, their families. She kept the skulls in her quarters as a memorial, not a trophy. Each one represented a life ended because of pride and prejudice. She refused to let their deaths be meaningless. Taman and Hagen stayed close to her throughout her training. They helped her process what had happened, reminded her that she was still human, still capable of empathy and compassion. Without them, Jiu thought she might have become the monster some species accused her of being. 5 years after the Crucible, Captain Jiu commanded a joint human-alien special forces unit. Her team included members from a dozen species, including a young Drayor warrior who had specifically requested to serve under her. On her desk sat a small memorial with 9 names engraved on it. She looked at it every day. One afternoon, a new alien cadet entered her office for orientation. The cadet was nervous, clearly uncomfortable about working with humans. "Is it true?" the cadet asked hesitantly. "The story about the Crucible, about the 10 hunters." Jiu looked at the memorial, then back at the cadet. "It's true. I survived by doing what I had to do. I killed 9 beings who were hunting me. I took their skulls as proof, and I carry the weight of those deaths every single day." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. But survival isn't about being the strongest or the most ruthless. It's about being willing to do what others won't, endure what others can't, and still hold on to your humanity when it's over. She turned back to the cadet. "You're here because you want to learn from the best. That's good. I'll teach you everything I know. But remember this, the best warriors aren't the ones who win every fight. They're the ones who know when to fight, how to fight, and why they're fighting. Never forget the why." The cadet nodded slowly, some of the nervousness fading. "Yes, Captain." "Good," Jiu said. "Now let's talk about your training." As the years passed, the story of Jiu and the 10 hunters became legend. It was told in military armies across the galaxy, studied in tactical courses, and debated in philosophy classes. Some versions made her a hero, others made her a villain, but all versions agreed on one thing. She had changed how the galaxy saw humanity forever. Applications from humans to the Galactic Military Academy increased dramatically. More importantly, the predator species learned an important lesson. Humans were not prey. They were not weak. They were a species that had survived by becoming the most dangerous predators on their own planet, and those instincts had not been dulled by reaching the stars. The galaxy learned to respect humanity, not because humans were stronger or more advanced, but because they were survivors. Because they adapted to any situation. Because they never gave up, never surrendered, and never accepted defeat. Years later, Jiu retired from active service. She returned to Earth and wrote a book about her experiences. In it, she detailed everything that had happened during the Crucible. But more importantly, she wrote about the 9 individuals she had killed. She gave them names, faces, stories. She humanized them, even though they weren't human. The book ended with a simple message. I survived. They didn't. I carry that weight every day. But I also carry the hope that their deaths meant something.